They were brothers, grew up side by side, shared laughter, stories, and an altar, but it only took one moment, just one, for everything to fall apart. And it wasn't because of open hatred, tribal war, or land disputes. The first murder in the Bible was born where no one expects, in the heart of someone who wanted to be accepted, but was rejected. Have you ever thought about that? The first human death didn't come from a criminal, but from a worshiper. And that changes everything. This tragic episode involving Cain and Abel isn't just about jealousy. It's about something much deeper and far more uncomfortable. What happens when God accepts someone and doesn't accept you? Have you ever felt that? Like you're doing everything right and still no one sees you? Like you give, you try, and yet you feel invisible? Yeah, Cain's story reveals a hard truth that few are willing to face. Not every rejection is unjust. Sometimes, it's a response to a heart that refuses to change. And here's the most provocative part. God didn't stop the murder. He allowed one man's free will to end the life of his own brother. Doesn't that bother you? Because it deeply bothers me. Why didn't God intervene? Why didn't he hold back Cain's hand in that moment of rage? Maybe because the greatest lesson isn't in preventing the fall. It's in showing us what happens when we refuse to confront our own frustrations. This story is about that, about the poison of envy, unresolved anger, the silence that kills, and the consequences that never stop chasing us. So here's the real question. What are you doing with the parts of yourself God hasn't yet accepted? When two brothers raise their hands to heaven with such different intentions, the result is never just about what is being offered. Cain and Abel weren't simply bringing fruits and animals. They were exposing their hearts. While Abel arrived with the best he had, an offering born from honor, Cain gave something more shallow, perhaps automatic, as if doing out of obligation, not love. This isn't just a Bible story. It's a mirror of the energy we bring to what we offer in life. And you, what have you been offering? Your time, your effort, your words, have they come with excellence or just in a rush? There's a brutal difference between doing something out of duty and doing it out of devotion. Abel understood that the altar wasn't a place for leftovers, but for sacrifice. And by definition, sacrifice costs something. Today, we can apply this in so many areas. Do you give your best at work, even when no one's watching? In your faith, are you truly present or just physically there? Some people pray, but never connect. Others say they love, but hold back their hearts. The gesture might be the same, but the essence changes everything. You can even see this in our human relationships. You know when someone gives you a gift just to check a box? And when another person offers something simple, but with such thought and care that you feel it deeply. The difference is in the spirit of the gesture, not the size of the present. Cain and Abel teach us that God doesn't look first at what we give, but at how we give it. And if that's true for God, imagine the impact it could have on how we live our routines, our businesses, our relationships. That's why this story hits so deep. It reveals the human heart. When we offer something, whether it's a task, a helping hand, or even advice, it carries an invisible signature. Some give the bare minimum and expect applause. Others give everything and expect nothing. And it's that kind of offering, unpretentious and genuine, that transforms environments. Like the aroma of Abel's sacrifice, it rises and reaches a different place, a place the superficial can never touch. But then comes the part that challenges us the most, because those who give their best don't always get applause here on earth. Sometimes the purest hearts are overlooked, dismissed, even mocked. And then what? What do you do when your offering goes unnoticed by people, but not by God? That's where the contrast between Abel's acceptance and Cain's rejection sparks something deep within the soul. Because what comes next changes everything. God's acceptance isn't random. It's like sunlight. It doesn't bend to please anyone. It simply reveals what's already there. When God looked at the sacrifices, he didn't just see a lamb or some fruit. He saw the intention behind them. He accepted Abel's because it came with surrender, truth, and honor. But Cain stayed on the surface. And here's a principle most people don't talk about. God doesn't negotiate with appearances. He responds to essence. And when the essence is shallow, the echo is too. This part of the story always hits hard for those who constantly seek recognition. Because let's be honest, it's painful to watch someone be approved while you're overlooked, especially when you feel like you've done your part. But here's the subtle twist. Have you really? God doesn't reject out of whim. He reveals what's out of alignment. And when he rejects, it's not to shame, it's to redirect. But a wounded ego often refuses to see that. The pain of not being chosen can blind even the most hard-working heart. In today's terms, it's like finishing a project at work without heart, just waiting for the paycheck. Or staying in a relationship where you're present but not invested. God rejects that kind of offering, even if others applaud it. Because to him, the packaging means nothing. Only the motivation matters. And here's what's even more striking. Cain's rejection wasn't final. It was an invitation to change. But he didn't listen. He chose to nurse resentment instead. And when resentment goes untreated, it turns to poison. Have you ever stopped to think how often we respond like Cain? Instead of asking, what can I do better? We ask, why him and not me? And just like that, our focus shifts from our own altar to someone else's. Competition replaces correction. Envy takes the place of inspiration. This applies to your spiritual life, but also to your everyday one. Instead of criticizing someone else's success, why not learn from it? Instead of comparing, what if you started healing? God's response is far more connected to your heart than your outward performance. And it's in this very moment that the story intensifies. Because God's rejection is not the end, but what you choose to do with it might be. Cain could have redone his offering. He could have learned from his brother, but he chose a different path. And that's when the poison of comparison started to ferment from within. Envy starts off quietly. It doesn't scream. It watches, it calculates, it ferments. That's exactly how it began with Cain. The eyes that once looked toward the altar slowly turned toward his brother. And suddenly, it wasn't about what he had offered anymore. It was about who Abel was. Because when a heart is wounded by rejection, it starts searching for someone to blame. And in Cain's case, Abel became the target. What began as frustration became indignation. And from indignation came wrath. A wrath masked as self-righteousness. A fury that whispered, I deserve to be in his place. How many times have we fallen into the same emotional spiral? You put in the work, do your best, and then someone else gets the recognition, and deep down you start wanting justice, but a justice already tainted. Instead of confronting your own truth, you start secretly hoping the other person stumbles. Envy is cruel because it dresses up as fairness. I deserve that too. No one sees my effort. No one understands what I go through. And just like that, the heart that once saw growth now only wants to soothe its pain by punishing the one standing where it wishes to be. And here's the haunting part. Envy doesn't always come from enemies. It often comes from brothers. And that's when it hurts the most. Watching a stranger succeed is one thing. But when it's someone close to you, someone at your level, someone on the same roof, it magnifies every hidden insecurity and comparison. Envy doesn't just want what the other has. It wants them to lose what they have. And when that seed is planted in the soil of unresolved anger, it grows like a weed, choking out every chance of healing. Cain could have asked, what did my brother do that pleased God? But instead he asked, why him and not me? Do you see the difference? One seeks growth. The other feeds resentment. And when resentment takes over, reality becomes distorted. You stop seeing facts and start seeing threats. Everything feels personal. Everything feels unjust. And when your heart gets to that point, there's no argument strong enough, no conversation deep enough, no love wide enough to break through. Because the heart has already slammed the door and thrown away the key. And meanwhile, Abel kept being who he was. He didn't provoke. He didn't compete. He simply lived his offering. And that, for Cain, was unbearable. Because Abel's very existence became a living reminder of what Cain refused to face, his own failure. And when envy reaches that point, it begins to whisper a dark solution, one that would silence the discomfort once and for all. Cain's decision was impulsive. It was premeditated. The invitation to the field wasn't a brotherly walk. It was a trap. And perhaps the most shocking part, he didn't kill an enemy. He killed his brother. The blood of the first human victim in history didn't come from war. It came from a broken bond. That reveals something deep about the human heart. When we don't deal with our pain, it finds a way to spill out. And sometimes that spill comes in the form of violence, physical, emotional, or spiritual. Cain didn't just want to eliminate Abel. He wanted to silence what Abel represented. And that's the thing. Sometimes what we want to get rid of isn't a person, but a symbol. Someone who reminds us of what we could have been. Someone who reflects us. And that reflection stings. Another person's success starts to feel like a personal insult. Their light feels like an attack. And that field where Cain led Abel may seem far from us, but it's closer than we think. It can look like a passive-aggressive comment, a public humiliation, a silent sabotage. Today, many kill Abels with words, with gossip, with sarcasm, with ingratitude. And the modern-day field, it could be the workplace, the family dinner table, or even a social media comment section. That's where masks fall and true intentions rise. Cain, in that moment, became the symbol of what happens when anger is fed instead of healed. Because no one commits murder out of nowhere. They've already killed in their thoughts, their judgment, their craving to see someone else fall. And perhaps the most haunting part? Abel didn't fight back. There's no record of resistance, no defense, no plea. He was killed unjustly, in silence, like so many still are today. It reminds us that the faithful may not always have the chance to defend themselves. Sometimes, the price of devotion is sacrifice. And yet, heaven watches, not passively, but attentively. God didn't stop the tragedy in that moment, but he took note. And when innocent blood hits the ground, something supernatural is set in motion. Because innocent blood never stays silent. It cries out. It screams from the earth to the heavens. And that silent scream shifts the course of history. Cain thought the field was the end, but in reality, it was the beginning of judgment. Because no matter how deeply human hands try to bury consequences, the voice of the righteous never fades. Sooner or later, it echoes. God's question wasn't born out of ignorance. He doesn't need to ask in order to know. He asked to confront. Where is your brother? Wasn't about location. It was a divine invitation for Cain to face his own abyss. But Cain, like so many still do today, chose denial. He pretended to be innocent, tried to cover blood with words. He said, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And in that cold, detached answer, he revealed the numbness of a conscience already cauterized. Because anyone who lies to God has long been lying to themselves. That question still echoes today. Where is your brother? Isn't just about the other person. It's about you. It's about responsibility. About refusing to stand by when you could have reached out. How many times do we see someone fall and think, not my problem? How many times do we dress up indifference as neutrality? Being your brother's keeper doesn't mean being his judge. It means being his bridge. It means caring. And those who stop caring about others have already begun dying inside. God confronts Cain not only for what he did, but for what he no longer felt. And the most disturbing part? Cain didn't cry. He showed no remorse. He didn't break. And that perhaps is more frightening than the crime itself. Because some people fall and shatter, but others fall and harden. They pretend it's nothing. They justify. They rationalize. And that reveals a heart turned to stone, where the grace of God can no longer take root. A heart like that doesn't just need correction. It needs resurrection. And God's question becomes a mirror, one where no one can hide. In that moment, God acts not like an enraged judge, but like a wounded father, firm but not reckless. He doesn't ignore the crime, but he also doesn't unleash blind fury. He investigates with a love that disciplines. Because punishment without confrontation becomes mere cruelty. But where there is dialogue, there's still a door to redemption. It's as if heaven whispers, you still have time to see yourself. And that's one of the most profound lessons in this story. God always gives man a chance to stand up before he ever steps back. But Cain didn't take that chance. He chose pride over confession. And what followed wasn't just a sentence. It was a life forever marked. Because when you refuse to face your own shadow, it will follow you. And the next step inevitably changes everything. The consequence of sin isn't just about what is lost. It's about what remains. When God declares that Cain will be a wanderer, he's not just speaking geographically, but spiritually. Cain becomes a man without roots, without peace, without rest. It's not that he had nowhere to live. It's that he no longer had a place to belong. Because guilt, when left untreated, turns any home into exile. And here lies a profound truth. There is no punishment heavier than living far from a clean conscience. Cain's curse wasn't just for killing. It was for refusing to repent. God doesn't curse failure. He corrects it. But when failure mixes with pride, it becomes rejection. And rejection poisons everything. How many people today are living like Cain? They walk, work, succeed, yet inside they're running from themselves, from truth, from what they did, and pretend not to remember. And that kind of escape is exhausting. You can outrun the world, but you can't outrun yourself. And that comes at a high cost. A wanderer isn't just someone who changes locations. It's someone who changes their purpose every week, who can't stay rooted in a relationship, a calling, a direction. The wanderer jumps from idea to idea, job to job, relationship to relationship. Try to fill something the void only seems to deepen. And more often than not, the root of that void is exactly what Cain experienced. The absence of genuine repentance. Because forgiveness does arrive, but it only enters through an open heart. And even then, God still protects Cain with a mark. That's almost incomprehensible to human logic. How could God protect a murderer? But that's just it. God's justice isn't driven by rage, but by balance. He punishes, but doesn't annihilate. He disciplines, but still preserves. And that says a lot about his character. God doesn't erase people just because they failed. He watches to see what they'll do with the second chance. Even if that second chance comes in the form of a scar. Cain left, but he carried marks. And with those marks, his story continued, wandering the earth, trying to build with hands that had once shed blood. Because life, after an unhealed failure, becomes an endless detour from what could have been. And it's in that trail of consequence that the Bible leaves a pause for us to ask ourselves, what you do after the fall says far more about you than the fall itself. How many times have you felt anger? Not because someone did something wrong, but because they succeeded where you failed. Maybe you've never killed anyone, but what about your thoughts? Harsh words? Silent judgments? Those hidden desires to see someone stumble just so you can feel better about yourself? Yeah, it's heavy, I know. But that's exactly why the story still speaks so loudly, even thousands of years later. The truth is, the difference between a pure heart and a poisoned one isn't about circumstances. It's about choices. Every day, you build an altar. Every day, you offer something. Your time, your attention, your energy. The question is, does it come from a place of honor or from obligation? From a heart that longs to please God, or from a need to compete with others? Because at the end of the day, what defines your journey isn't just what you do, it's how you do it. And if God were to ask you today, where is your brother? What would your answer be? Not just in the literal sense. Where are your relationships? Your empathy? Your responsibility toward others? Because here's the thing. You can't grow spiritually while running from emotional consequences. You can't rise toward heaven if you're ignoring the people beside you. It's time to re-examine your steps, your altars, your intentions, and most of all, how you respond to rejection and to someone else's acceptance. So, tell me in the comments, which part of this story confronted you the most? Did you see yourself more in Cain or in Abel? Have you ever been rejected? And did that change something deep inside you? I'd love to hear your story. Let's open up, reflect, grow together. That's what this channel is all about. For people brave enough to look into the mirror of the soul and not look away. And if this video spoke to you, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell icon. Because with every new video, we go deeper into the Bible's most powerful stories. And without even realizing it, you might just begin to understand your story a whole lot better.